Welcome everybody to a Silver Service at the Cattle Show. Today we are joined by Brent Holloway and Richard Savage, two individuals who I have worked very closely with in the years past at Talent. I know they've worked really closely together over the last 10 years. So without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves. Richard, why don't we kick off with you?
Sure. So, just so everybody knows, everyone just knows me as Savage, so you may hear that through the podcast. Um, I have led both inside sales, which now is called commercial sales SMB, as well as sales development, which has a number of different names that you may know out there, from SDR to BDR to ADR to TDR. I call it now XDR, just fill in the blank. I've worked with Brent Holloway of, as Jonathan mentioned, a number of years, but I've worked both in the security space as well as the data space, and have worked at rather large companies. In fact, that's where Brent and I met. HP is they were acquiring Tipping Point and ArcSight and a number of different businesses, as well as recently a startup that we went public called Talent, and that's where we met Jonathan, and have grown teams from as small as 4 people up to 60, and so have a variety of experience and experiences in SDR commercial sales.
Excellent. Welcome. And Brent, over to you.
All right, Brent Holloway. I've been in software sales my entire career, since graduating with a biology degree of all things from UC Santa Barbara. But I was fortunate to know an angel investor in a little software company called Blue Pumpkin Software, which is a funny name, but really cool technology that thrives today under a different brand. And so 6 years as an individual contributor, and then the last 20 in sales leadership, primarily over SMB, commercial, and SDR teams. And as you mentioned, 10 of the last 12 years with Richard. We had a good run at HP, and then we had nearly a 7-year run together at Talent, which had an IPO and a big exit through a private equity event, 2.4 billion in 2021. And then the last 2 years at Harness, which is a really hot unicorn up in San Francisco in the software delivery space.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So, I guess kicking this off, as most people know that watch this, we want to share a bit of an insight into a conversation around how people can kind of break that barrier through the lens of TA. What I wanted to show through our conversation is really how you guys look at it from a sales hiring manager perspective. So I think it would be really insightful for us just to sort of talk a little bit about how you guys see the recruitment industry when you're hiring people. What do you look for when you're looking at CVs? What do you think about when you review an interview? How can people be successful? And I think from your sides, looking at that entry permit into sales, I think there is a huge opportunity within software sales and people kind of breaking into that, whether it be as SDR or CSR. Being able to break into that industry, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity for people right now. So just to sort of quickly kick off from our side, I think it would be great just to get an idea of how you guys see that recruitment process, and what do you think makes somebody stand out from the crowd?
There's one thing that just popped in my mind, Jonathan. It'd be interesting what you think on this, Brent. From the recruitment side, right, working with, say, someone like yourself, Jonathan, and there are definitely a number of others that Brent and I could name. There's a lot of sales recruiters with a lot of experience that can intake what we're looking for and go help quite a bit. And there's a lot of inexperienced ones. And so I think the first step that I always now, I think subconsciously, but now probably consciously, is as I say it out loud, I need to know who I'm working with, right? Do I have a true partner that can help me go find the profile that I'm looking for, or not, right? And if they can't, then there's a lot more work on my shoulders. It's fine, right? Like that's what we do. But it's really interesting, right, to see, all right, so who's your recruiter? Who are you working with, right? Because I'm going to throw out a lot of different criteria depending on the role, depending on the need of the business. It depends, right? It's not a one size fits all. I don't know, Brent, what do you think on that?
Well, as I was thinking through this, I think you need to take a look at what are your sources for recruiting. So absolutely the internal recruiter is a big one. Richard and I have hired over 100 people together. I think 100 just at Talent over that 7-year span. But as I was preparing for this, I wrote down, what works well on average. I came up with 5 categories. The first one is maintaining an ongoing bench. That might be you as the hiring manager. That might be in partnership with your recruiter. We were fortunate to work with some really good ones like Jonathan and Megan Bancroft that would help us maintain that bench, because you don't want to be, spinning up from scratch when you get that new rec. And remind me later, Jonathan, I have a good story to tell you about the blitz that Richard and I had to do at the CEO's request to hire 10 people almost overnight. So that was a good story. And having a bench can help you, do that quickly. Internal recruiters, obviously super important. You got to have a cadence with them and work with them on an ongoing basis. That's number 2. Number 3 are the internal referral programs. So let me take just a minute on this one. Of course, it's easy to send out an email saying, hey, we opened up a new rec. Does anybody know anybody? That's great. Sometimes it works. A trick that we learned from Megan that worked really well is she would actually sit down with internal people that had networks of similar people, and she would go through in LinkedIn running Boolean searches for the criteria. And many times they would say, oh, yeah, I worked with that person. They were really good. You should reach out to them. So when you just ask them to think off the cuff, they may not think of their network, but that process, and it can take 15 minutes, can really uncover some great people. So that's an element of an internal referral program, as well as paying some type of a bonus, right? Whether it's $500 or $1,000 or sometimes $2,000 or $3,000, that's a relatively inexpensive expense relative to the value that you get. And we measured that the people that we hired by way of internal referrals produced more and lasted longer, right? So that's it's a really inexpensive
and ramp up quicker, right? Because you've got a friend, right? You've got somebody that 100%. You can go say, hey, Jonathan, I know they told me 4 times, but how do I do that again? Right? When you've got a friend, you ramp up faster.
Yeah. And real briefly, the other 2 areas that I wrote down were external recruiters, I think, are great. Of course, a lot of companies want to avoid that expense when they can, but having it available, especially on a contingency basis where you only pay the fee if you get the right hire, it's a great investment. And we've made a lot of good hires through external recruiters. And then the last one is really just a question. It's super simple, but I encourage people to ask themselves, if they ask the candidates that they're talking to, if they're not a fit for whatever reason, do you know anybody that might be a great fit for this role? I've hired a lot of people that were referrals of referrals, and that simple question can lead to some good candidates.
You mean during the process, like with those people you're engaging with during the process? I mean, when I was a recruiter years ago, finding when you've got somebody in the process, just being able to sort of say, hey, we're hiring for a bunch of these roles, especially when it comes to SDRs and you have a big push, like being able to go to people. And if you have really an exciting process, a really good candidate experience, then you're able to sort of leverage those people in the process in a hope that, good people that are in the process will know good people as well. And I think a lot of those people are like, hey, I'm really enjoying this process. I would love to, bring somebody else in and join at the same time. I think it's a really good passion point.
100%. You touched on one of the other points I was going to bring up too, which is the great candidate experience. Not having too many steps, being responsive, not leaving them hanging out to dry. Like that's such an important element.
Definitely. And I will touch on that later on. I think one of the, touching back onto what Richard, you were saying about building relationships with good recruiters. I think it does also come into the point of what you were saying there, both, working closely with the internal recruitment team and getting them knowledgeable about what you are looking for, but also equally the external agencies. I mean, I'm one of these individuals that obviously has always looked at reducing that cost. And I think being creative about that spend, on whether it's through agencies, whether it's through referral campaigns. I mean, Richard, you and I worked on a really cool one where it was just, it was a set of AirPods, and actually we gamified the whole thing, and actually people really sort of rallied behind it. And I think it's also doesn't, that on top of the referral bonus with something that's a bit of fun can actually really sort of engage with people on that side as well. I think one of the things that I've always remembered working with you guys both on was the branding side of things. And I think, how a company engages and shows what their culture is like, what a hiring manager is looking for in a slightly more creative way through video, through posts, or whatever it may be. We were lucky enough to work with people like yourselves that were super engaged with those and actually got creative yourselves. I remember one of the ones we did where it was like it ended up being like a full-on script, but we also had fun with it, and I think that gave us so many outtakes just to show the genuine sort of side of the business as well, the fun part of how we had fun creating all this stuff. So what are your kind of key takeaways? I guess from somebody searching for a role, how should that person from your side bring to an interview process or an application that understanding of a business culture? Does that affect your decision process when they're going through an interview or something along those lines?
Yeah, I love the question. Richard, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's I asked the same question no matter who I'm interviewing, SDR, doesn't matter. It could be any role. I ask it. I say, "Hey, Jonathan, before we get into all the business stuff in your resume, tell me a little about you. What are you passionate about?" And I get a lot of information out of that. It's an easy question, right? It's you talking about you, and what you love and what you're passionate about. But I do find out about who you are, right? And the passions and the fun that you are as an individual. And then that gives me the ability to share a little bit about our culture, right? So then you start to learn a little bit about who we are. But I also get some really interesting business stuff out of it, right? I get good active listening skills. It's amazing how many people go, "Oh, thank you, Richard. I went to college here and I did these jobs," right? And, well, that's not what I asked, right? That's not the sign of a good salesperson. Good active listening and things of that nature. But it all ties together with the culture because, man, you give me, that you're passionate about. We've had somebody that was a chess coach to coaching Little League World Series to book writers. I mean, all over the map. And I can ask a lot of questions. I'm in sales. I can ask a lot of questions about that. Oh, tell me about that. Why do you love that? Right? I don't know anything about that. Maybe I do know something about that. But I learn a lot about you and you learn a lot about me in that way and in who we are and how that might fit. And I think that starts the motion of both sides understanding the culture of who we are as a business, but also who you are as an individual, right? Because we're both interviewing each other.
Yeah, I like that.
I think, step one of selling a good culture is having a good culture. And so to the degree that you can influence that, you got to make it a positive work environment. I think Richard and I were fairly successful there. And it's more about the day to day, right? It's a positive work environment, constructive coaching, but also we had some fun on the side. So this is worthy of a 30-second story. 2019, Richard, we invited the whole team there in Redwood City. We probably invited 15 or 20 people. And I think we had 8 people that actually went, but we did a paddleboard across Lake Tahoe adventure. It was from South Lake Tahoe, Nevada, 17 miles. Not a perfect line, but we did all right to Tahoe City and on North Lake Tahoe. And it was a cool event. Like it was a really fun thing, and we had a great time. And we put that into our promotional video, so people saw that. I think hopefully people enjoyed it and saw that we like to do some fun stuff. There were some Warriors, go Warriors, playoff games along the way when they were on their 5-year run there. That was really fun. But yeah, and they're going to hear about the culture, right? Whether it's through Glassdoor or talking with other existing team members, they're going to get a feel for that. So culture is super important, right? You got to make it right and have examples of the culture that you're trying to build and why it's good and what you do about it.
And I'll add to that, Jonathan, real quick. I think a big piece of that puzzle that Brent and I've done, and there's lots of examples. We've done lots of that stuff. Is it's not always we kind of joke it was an unsponsored event. A lot of the times it might be on Brent and I's dime. It might be on everyone's dime. We do ski trips and all sorts of different things that were outside of work, that were fun, that were building culture. I mean, selfishly, we had a great time too, right? Like we didn't do it for a checkbox. We did it because we genuinely liked hanging out with everybody and we all talked about, oh, that sounds fun. Brent's got an adventure that one day I'm sure he'll pull off of jet skiing the coast of California. But they're real adventures, right? It's not just go to the bar and have a pint type of thing, right? They're real adventures, but um, they aren't necessarily, like I said, that checkbox sponsored events. And so, that to me is what culture is. It's not saying it to saying it. It's not saying it because the board told me or Brent, or my leader told me that I was supposed to do it. To me, that's not culture, right? It's you miss the genuine aspects of that. And so I think that's an important piece of that puzzle, is that it wasn't always sponsored. Sometimes it was, or maybe partially, right? But it was that real human, outside of work, friendship, relationship building.
I think that's when you find a company that has, like, you can find places that have special cultures that, like say, it's like, I think from our side, when you do things off your own back, it didn't have to be like, oh, there's an open bar or this is a paid for trip or whatever it may be. Something where, I used to get together with my team and we'd go for walks. We'd call them strategy walk sessions or whatever, and just be out of the office and just actually have some space where you haven't got a laptop or you haven't got a phone. The amount of strategy drawings that were done in the mud with sticks of like, well, if we do it like this, or if we approach it in this way, actually, it's quite fun how those can create actually stronger bonds and stronger memories within a business as well. And I think finding a company like that, I think that's really important. And it's a really hard thing to get across to people without it coming across as fluffy or like unbelievable. I think that's where, looking at how the sales guys are posting things out on social media or on LinkedIn on their own profiles and stuff like that. I've always, you guys know, been a huge advocate of getting teams to share their own content as well. I think is really important. And I think, interestingly, just as a final point, before I dive into the next question, was like being able to share both the positive fun stuff, but also opening the door to the challenges and basically going, hey, this isn't perfect. This is what you're coming into. I think more from, when somebody's interviewing with a recruiter, and I think if you can build a relationship from a hiring manager's perspective with a good recruiter, and as you go through the process, asking what are the challenges, what are the pains. But I think being honest from a recruiter or from a hiring manager or an interview team about those challenges, everybody should kind of step into a business on their onboarding process knowing, right, I'm coming into this and this bit isn't perfect, this bit isn't, could be better or whatever it may be. In terms of looking at the negative points and actually spinning them not into a positive, but actually bring people on who are like, yeah, I'm actually really up for this challenge, I think is important.
Touch on a couple of things there. Authenticity in the process, I think, is a big one. One of my mentors, Brad Stratton, was really big on this in the interview process. He'd ask them some tough questions, and were they authentic with their answers? Did they own up to some of their mistakes and learn from their mistakes? And that's a huge element of coachability, which is, according to Mark Roberge, if you follow Mark, another one of my favorite guys to follow online, he talks about coachability being the number one factor in terms of what's most highly correlated to that person's success. And that's one element of measuring coachability, as well as the role play. I don't know if we'll get into role plays, but I think that's another good one. So yeah, authenticity and setting really good expectations. You don't want to oversell the job, right? You don't want them to be disappointed 30 days in. So I think it's really important to be authentic on both sides of that interview process.
Agreed. I think interesting, we can jump into the role play sort of presentation side of things, actually, because I think that's a really interesting part as people are preparing for interviews. I have my thoughts on kind of role plays. I've always struggled with them when I've gone for sales roles in the past, because recruitment was always kind of like sales as well. But I think the presentation side of things are really interesting, especially, understanding how somebody's mindset works and things like that. What do you guys look for? If you're requiring a role play or a presentation stage, what are your thoughts in terms of what do you look for? I know when we've spoken in the past, it's not perfection, but I'll let you guys sort of talk a little bit about what you tend to sort of see. What are the gems you look for?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I'm going to steal I think you coined it, at least in my world, Brent. Double click is the word. and I use it now all the time, but somebody that has the ability to double click and just ask questions about your responses and anything that has been discussed in general, and come back around and just keep continuing to ask questions, especially on a sales side, right? It doesn't matter if you're talking SDR or an enterprise AE. Somebody that has that capacity to do that tends to gather a lot of really, vital information. And you can use any of the different sales, acronyms out there of MedPick and Medic and all BANT and all that stuff. But somebody that just has that natural ability to do that, they don't even really need to know the product necessarily all that well for, if you're doing an interview, right? You obviously want to spend a little time and, go on their website and YouTube and a number of things. But honestly, if you're just able to ask a lot of questions and just have that inquisitive double click mindset, you get so much out of it. But then as a hiring manager on the other side, we see that, right? And sometimes the double clicks, in preparation might be just writing down a bunch of questions, right? And that's fine, right? Maybe you get to all of them, maybe you don't, because you start double clicking, right? Based on those questions. But that to me is probably the number one thing that I notice from, on the hiring side, is just somebody's natural ability. Maybe it was learned, but their ability to do that.
Mm.
That's a good one. Yeah, let me, if I may, Jonathan, take a minute to talk about the role play process that Richard and I refined over the last 10 years. And for your listeners, if anybody wants to see it, I've got it outlined in an online Word document. Reach out to me and I'm happy to share it with you. But it has 3 parts. It's an hour long, and we try to make it a very positive experience for the candidate, of course. But it's an important hour because we've made some, I'd say, important decisions on, like, if there's 2 or 3 finalists, like sometimes the role play makes the difference in terms of who you actually hire. And some people seem like a great cultural fit and they look great on paper, but then when they get to the role play, they really struggle. And then sometimes that person doesn't go forward at that point. So what we've refined over the years is it's 3 parts, and it's the same, by the way, for BDR candidates or for commercial AE candidates. Some of the RVPs that we worked with adopted this for their enterprise AE candidates. So it really works for any sales role. But the first part is about 5 minutes where the candidate walks us through how they would prepare for an executive level call. And so you learn quite a bit there about their preparation. Are they winging it? Like, what sites did they go to? What type of information do they get? And how are they going to use it? So hopefully they're effective in their 5 minutes there explaining about how they do their preparation. The next 20 minutes is in character. They are now the AE or BDR for whichever company we work for, and they are doing a discovery call. It's up to them if they want to use slides or just have a conversation. I would say most people just have a conversation, touching briefly on the Gong research that shows that using slides in that first meeting is negatively correlated with moving forward.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the slides per se. I think the challenge is when you're presenting slides, you might err on the side of presenting and not listening and asking questions. Yeah. So take that. You can use slides, and my rule of thumb is ask 1 question per slide. It makes sure your audience is engaged. But I play the role, a CIO of some tech company that they're trying to sell to, and I want to get a sense for what questions do they ask. To Richard's point, are they double clicking? Are they trying to do at least a little bit of quantification of value in there? Some people you can tell are using the BANT matrix, and they're just way too quickly, going through budget, authority, need, time frame. Yeah. It's a bit of a turnoff. But you learn a lot in those 20 minutes. And there's always objection handling, right? I'll throw out some of the common objections. I try to give everybody the same experience, so it's the level playing field. But you learn a lot in that short period of time. So at this point, you're a little over 30 minutes into that hour. And they know this is coming. They don't know the details, but they know that the negotiation's coming. And I do this for BDR candidates as well. Even though we know that they don't have much, if any, negotiating experience, we want them to do this next 5 to 10 minute negotiation role play. And we assure them that, don't worry, this is going to be weighted like almost not at all for your overall score, but just have fun with it. We want to see what your instincts are around negotiating and finding common ground. So the scenario is your list price is $100,000. You've given that to me. You've spent at least 2 months in this fictitious sales cycle doing POV support and answering questions and all the rest. You've spent, several hours a week over the last couple of months working on this opportunity. But it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the last day of the fiscal year. and you have discretion, Jonathan, to go down to $70,000 to get this win, but you're $80,000 away from your President's Club number, which is a nice bonus and a trip to Hawaii or somewhere really great. And oh, by the way, your manager, he or she, who's probably on the phone with us as I do this role play, is $85,000 away from their President's Club number for the team, and the rest of the team is done for the day. So they're really rooting on you to get this win today. And then I open up the call. I say, "Hey, Jonathan, great work over the last couple months. Thank you for your great support. I've got some good news and bad news for you." Probably giving away too much here, Richard, but it's okay.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right.
Even if you know what the role play is, like it's still hard to execute, and that's fine. So
Can I put a little snippet? If you're interviewing with Richard or Brent, please watch this podcast.
Yeah.
We're not giving away the right answer. We're just giving you a heads up on what's coming. So, Jonathan, good news, bad news. Really liked your technology. In fact, you were like 2 points higher than the nearest competitor, but they're bigger and they've been around longer. And they really wanted my business. They've offered me a price of $50,000. That's really compelling. But hey, I'm a reasonable guy. I'll go to 60. So I'm going to pay a 20% premium from 50 to 60 because I want your solution. How does that sound? And so you're thinking like, oh no, I'm losing here. And so, if you don't know how to sell value, you're going to race to 70, or sometimes people go below the minimum, which is always interesting because they tell you 70. And
just go, okay.
Richard, what's your best guess? What percentage of our candidates? We've literally used this for 250 or 300 candidates for the 100 plus that we hired. What percentage, Richard, do you think got north of 80K to go to President's Club?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe 10, 15%. Most just try to get the deal done. I'd say a solid 60, 70%, I think, get the deal just done.
Sure. Yeah. Less than half for sure. Because I play not like to be mean. I like, if anything, like a little bit on the softer side compared to the reality.
You like hardball.
Seattle's are tough. They know how to grind, and so you got to be prepared for that. So anyway, that process that's about 45 minutes after we complete the negotiation and hopefully do a handshake deal, virtual handshake, and then probably the most important part is the feedback. So we take the last 10 or 15 minutes and we always start with the candidate. What did you think of the experience? What did you like? What did you not like? And sometimes they're really insightful. They go, oh, if I had to do it over again, I would have done this and this, and I know I missed that. And it's amazing when in real time they can pick up on what they could have done better. And then we give feedback. And always we err on the side of being constructive, but we do, if they made some mistakes, we'll call it out in a constructive way and see how they take it. Do they get defensive or do they agree? So I would say most candidates, even though it can be seen as somewhat stressful, we make it a positive experience. I'd say most people like the experience and they appreciate it and they feel like they learned something from it. And anyway, I'm big on this. I think it's an important part of the process. It's an hour well spent in the overall process to help you make the right decision.
I want to add a couple of things on this. So that very last piece, right? When we say, give us some feedback, what did you think before we tell you what we thought on constructive feedback? And man, if you've got a humble nature and, like Brent said, called out that I missed this or could have done better here, maybe you don't even know why, right? Like I know I didn't do very well there. That is bonus brownie points, right? We're slacking to each other or talking to each other afterwards going, this guy, girl knows what they're doing, right? Or knows that they don't know. It's also really interesting at that point. A lot of SDRs think, oh, I'm already ready to be an AE. And it's a little wake up call, right? Oh, you're not quite as ready as you thought you were, right? In that sense. But also taking two steps back to culture, we a lot of times will lead with this and say this is, hey, we're doing this. We know it's not an SDR or BDR type of criteria, right? But we want to see where you're at. We are looking to promote from within, right? I think our last time I looked at, we're 30+% of our SDRs generally make it up to an AE and continue on. It's really, really fun and interesting. A lot of now are enterprise AEs and have done really, really well. But we now have a pulse on where you are, right? Let's say it was you, Jonathan, where you are in your personal journey to becoming an AE. And if we hire you, now when it comes to coaching and enabling you and getting you there, right? Because that's what you want to do mostly, right? Some want to go into ops and other roles, but most want to go into sales. That gives us, what you sometimes you call and ask for references, right? And you're trying to get from the other previous sales manager, right? What can I do to help coach them? Well, now we just got some of that information right then and there. We know where you are, and that's, I think, a great culture thing, because we are genuine in that. That's what we're trying to get you off and up and to the right in your sales career. We're not trying to keep you for selfishly for the rest of our lives because you're a top producer and we're going to try to keep you here with us. I mean, we could, right? But that's just not who we are. And that is part of our culture. And so I think that all ties together, right? In that sense, all the way to the very, very last thing that we do before we're making a decision is actually still around that piece of the puzzle.
That's really interesting. Actually, that's an interesting point on the sort of, as we're kind of wrapping up, because I know we've got about 4 minutes left or so. But in terms of looking, I mean, one of the things that I liked when we were working together was seeing you guys develop people into A's and actually sort of letting them and actually really celebrating spreading their wings. That, I think, when I was working in sales recruitment years ago, it was probably one of the big flag things for people kind of going, this is why I'm looking for a new opportunity. How does somebody go about finding a company that is genuinely interested in developing people rather than just kind of going, we want to promote people to AEs, and then, a year and a half down the line, they're like, well, I've hit my numbers and I've exceeded my numbers. Where's my next opportunity coming from?
I'd love to take this one.
I can see you want to, yeah.
See him on the edge of the seat.
Well, so I think, as a hiring manager, we need to be audible ready with the examples of the career path from within, including the examples. So, you could wake me up at 2 a.m. and I'd be happy to brag about, playing a small role. Richard did 99.9% of it, but I played a small role in his career development, from individual contributor to second line, worldwide senior director. We had a lot of great promotions along the way. So I could speak to Richard and Yelena and Karan and Manjari and many others that had, really great career paths. So it wasn't just us, but of course, to Richard's point, we take a vested interest in them and their career. We help them get to that next level. But does the company have examples? Does the company do it? Like, show me examples. A lot of companies still have like the BDR role and then this 250K plus enterprise AE role and not much in between. So it's really nice when there's a stair-step approach and opportunities for development without having to take this massive leap of faith. And thankfully at Talent, we had that. At HP, actually, that was a great example. It was a year before they had that. They had the BDR role and then the enterprise role. And we basically created this inside sales organization that gave people that career path to do those things. So, I think, we're selling ourselves and our ability to help them on their career path, probably more than the company. And the good candidates want that. They want to know that the company has the career path and the levels along the way to incrementally grow, and that you, the hiring manager, are going to take a vested interest and that you've done it before, right? They should be audible ready with a few really good examples of people that did it. I think we may have overemphasized, even though it's the most common path to go from BDR to AE. But Richard did a great job with a couple of people that flourished and grew within the SDR leadership ranks, right? A lot of people want to go, they want to lead, but they want to lead BDR groups. And that's a great career too. And that's another path. So there's more than one right path. There's lots, even more than that. But when you have those examples, people go, wow, because a lot of times they don't know exactly what they want to do. They want to make more money, but they don't necessarily know what they want to do.
That's very common these days.
That's a good thing.
I think finding a company that is allowing people to explore different paths and different journeys. So I'm going to have to cut it a little bit short because I know I've got like 1 minute left of the recording time. So Apologies, Richard, not giving you the opportunity to speak in. I'm sure we'll circle around again. I would love to have you both back on for other subjects. So just to wrap up, thank you both. As you mentioned, Brent, if anyone has any questions or would like further insights, are they okay to get in touch with you guys?
100%. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, it's been great having a conversation with you both. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see you again.
See you soon. Thank you, Jonathan.
Cheers.
Bye, Richard.
Take care.